So when you're getting a bike, the first question you have to figure out is what type of motorcycle. And I get a lot of people asking me, what's the best first motorcycle? My answer to that is you have to figure out what kind of rider you want to be. So what I would do is go sit on a bunch of bikes and figure out what type of bike is good for you. You got cruisers. This is more of a bike where you can kind of just kick your feet up and relax. I'm actually sitting on a Harley here, but one thing about these bikes is they sit really low to the ground. And if you get a little bit of a lighter one, that can be a great bike to start on because they're not incredibly fast and they're low to the ground, which is nice for a new rider. And if you're a rider that likes to go on long rides, you can also buy a touring bike.
This happens in 20 years. Enjoy it. Your knees and your back are good now.
And the nice thing about these bikes is they're comfortable. And if you like to travel, they have a little bit extra storage. They usually have saddlebags in the back and you can transport your stuff around much easier compared to like a sport bike or something like that. There's like no room in the back of a sport bike at all. Naked bikes are also pretty popular. A lot of people like the Yamaha MT platform. That's a pretty popular naked bike. They tend to have more lower end power and a lot of people like that because you can have fun on the street. And there's different CC bikes you can actually choose from. Some are going to be faster than others. You also have dirt bikes. That's a personal favorite of mine. That's actually how I learned to ride. The nice thing about dirt bikes is if you fall on the ground, you don't have to worry about another car running you over. But sometimes you don't have the luxury of a spot to ride it or a truck to take it around. You also have dual sports, which is a street bike and a dirt bike. So you get the best of both worlds. And then you also have sport bikes. These to me are the coolest and they seem to be the most popular, but they are the most dangerous. Let's say you want a 600 sport bike. That's a heavily debated topic. Is a 600 good for a beginner? I think it could go either way. I've seen people do it and they're fine. I've seen other people literally lose their life. One of my best friends actually died on a 600. Going to get a 600 or even worse, 1000, but that's like going to get a Dodge Viper for your first car or a Corvette or a GT 500 or something like that. I actually got a performance car as my first car. This was it right here. It was an SRT4. What happened to that car? Oh, I wrecked it. I'm so thankful that that wasn't like a sport bike. If that was a sport bike, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you right now. This is your first bike. I would consider any two-cylinder engine like a 650, 400, 300. I would say that that's a good first bike. There's a reason why there's beginner bikes because they're less likely to kill you. Once you figure out the type of bike that you want, then you have to figure out, are you going to buy it new or are you going to buy it used? Now, there's pros and cons to buying used and buying new. The best bike is always going to be a new bike because it's in the best condition and it hasn't been owned by anyone. And the reason why I say that is because you don't have to trust that the previous owner or owners did or didn't do the maintenance they should have done. I see a lot of new riders get into it. They're like, I'm going to get a 600cc, but I want to save money. They go buy like a 07 or 06 and they don't realize everything that goes into it. They buy it and there's like 10 things wrong with it. They take it to the dealer like, oh my God, how much is it? And then they turn around and sell it. The next guy comes around. Did you do this, that? Yep. And they sell it to them. People flip these things all the time. The reason why I don't buy these new is because they're like 17 grand. And that's not accounting for interest, all those BS fees that go into it, depreciation. After all of that, you end up spending like mid 20s. And when I made this video like a month ago, a lot of people were like, dude, I got scammed the same way. That's because buying a used bike on Facebook is not the easiest thing, especially when you're new and you don't really know what you're looking at. There's a lot that you can actually get scammed on. A lot of people were like, man, you're picky. That's because a wrecked bike, that's a big deal. Sometimes it might look okay, but there could be a crack in the frame that you don't know about. And now the bike's totaled and you don't even know that. That's a big deal. If the bike's dropped, not that big of a deal. If it's been wrecked, that's a huge deal. Used is the best deal, but you got to deal with a lot of crap when it comes to used bikes, especially old bikes. If you're brand new and you're trying to get a killer deal on like a 600, I'm telling you right now, if it's like 15 years old, it's never turnkey like they say. Never. Everyone lie on Facebook. Holy crap. Almost everybody's lying about these bikes. If you're going to buy used and you don't feel comfortable going on Facebook and looking for all these things, then what I would tell you to do is go buy a lightly used bike from a dealership. Dealership, you are going to spend more money, but it's a business. So they have to have it somewhat up to par to go on the street because private party is definitely more of a risk. Let's say that I knew nothing about bikes. This was my first bike. I actually probably wouldn't want to go through the hassle of buying a used bike. Let's say that you're buying like a 400cc. If you look at this bike right here, this guy's asking $5,500 for a 2023, and this bike almost has 7K miles on it. If you go look at that same bike, KRT with ABS, they're asking 58 brand new for this bike. That's probably not out the door, but still, it is going to cost more money than a used bike, especially when you account for all those dealership fees and all that BS. But if you're looking at this bike used and you can buy the same one for like $1,000 or maybe a little bit more brand new, and you pay in cash, that way you don't have to pay interest, that actually makes more sense to buy that bike new, especially if it's literally cheaper brand new than what they're asking for it used. That literally makes no sense at all. Going back to the 400, this is a lot more reasonable right here. Has a little over 5K miles on it, but he's asking 4,200 OBO, which means less than 4,200. Looks to be in pretty good condition. So if you could get this for like in the high threes and you go look at it, doesn't really need much, and it's actually in the condition that he says it's in, then this is something to consider buying used. But you really have to look at the price when it comes to buying a used bike. When you're buying like a 1,000, they're insanely expensive. And you can go look at the old ones that cost 5 to 6 grand, somewhere in that ballpark. That's a lot cheaper than 20 grand. That makes sense to buy used. But these lower CC bikes that people own for maybe a year and they get tossed around like no other and wrecked because a lot of people buy them to learn on them and then want to upgrade. And they're asking almost the same price as brand new. That doesn't always make the most sense. But if you can find one, maybe like a 2024 or 2023 that's on the showroom floor and you only have to pay 2 grand more than a bike with like 10K miles on it that's used, I would recommend getting a bike like that. And the next thing you have to decide is, how are you paying for it? The best deal you can always get is paying in cash. How do dealerships make the most money? From interest. That's how they make the most money. People see this like, oh, it's a gsxr. I'm like, dude, I paid cash. They're cheap, they're fast, and they do the same thing that a new bike does for a fraction of the price. No interest. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Especially if you get like a long loan and you have bad credit. Oh my goodness, please don't finance it. Don't even get me started on a car. Holy crap. That price actually turns into like 8,000 on top of the MSRP, especially long loan. I'm like, no, oh my goodness, no. I'm actually looking for a bike again right now. How am I going to buy it? I'm paying in cash every single time cash. So if you ask me, I'm grandpa. I'm telling you, hey, pay cash because it's the cheapest. But if you're buying a new bike, maybe you don't have that cash. But what I would say, if you can't afford it, just wait a little bit, then buy it, or finance it and pay it off as soon as possible. What you don't want to do is go finance a new leader bike. First day you drop it, maybe you wreck it, then it's just a disaster. What it does is it really ruins the experience. After you buy the bike, you have to also include some other things in your budget, like gear. And I said this in my last video. I showed this clip right here. I was like, don't be this guy. This guy is actually me. Somebody commented and said this. And I was like, wait a second. You left out the part where I said, don't be like me. Buy gear. The guys at the dealership are going to tell you, oh, can't put a price on safety. I'm like, yes, I can. I can put a price on anything today. Riding jeans, jacket, helmet, gloves, boots, that stuff costs money. You could literally spend $1 grand on a helmet. If you're getting a full suit, it's going to be expensive. So you got to set aside money for gear. Also insurance. This is why I tell you not to get a higher CC bike, especially if you're young and you don't have a good driving record. Oh my goodness. You have to weigh that out too. What I would do is, if you are going to get a higher CC bike, I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying, if you are going to do that, what you should do is call around, figure out how much it costs to actually insure that bike. The insurance companies know with these bikes are high risk. They're like, oh my God, this is going to cost me money. That's why they charge you a lot, especially if you're bad driving record. I actually had a friend, he had an '05 R1. He was paying like $140 a month in insurance. He was like, you know what? I'm just unloading this thing. When I first started, I called a bunch of insurance companies. Actually didn't even matter. They were all like the same. So I just ended up going with the car insurance company that I use. It was high, but it was the same as the other one. So I was like, I'll just do this. And then after a few years, it wasn't really coming down much. And then I started calling around again. And I'm not paid to say this. I went to Progressive and they gave me a much, much better rate. But that's with a maxed out deductible, no roadside assistance. Me also telling them it has no modifications, because that also jacks up the rate. And paid in full for the entire year and +5 on my driving record. It's $692 to cover this bike for the entire year. And that's me doing everything to get this payment down to the cheapest possible price, not monthly payment, because that ends up being more money. And if you have an old bike and go liability, you actually end up paying pretty much nothing. And I actually live in a state where I have to pay property tax. The state values this bike at 3 grand. I was like, that's a joke. I want to get it for that. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm like, wait, what is insurance going to give me for this? I'm like, oh, we'll give you market value. What is market value? I don't know. The state telling me it's worth 3. Facebook's telling me it's worth, I don't even know at this point. It could be 8, could be 6. I go to the dealership, they're going to give me like maybe 3. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to give me there. At this point, I don't know what it is. I'm like, if you're asking me, I'll take 7. So if you're paying a ridiculous amount of money for insurance, it might not even be worth it to own. And sometimes you can actually pay liability, which is more risky, but you could always sell it wrecked and still get like a few $1,000 even for a wrecked bike. But that's totally up to you. It actually might be cheaper for you to get a lower CC, have it for a while, let that rate come down, then go get a faster bike later on down the road. And after you get gear and insure it and do all that, there's no way that you're not doing one thing to this. Every single person that gets any bike, pretty much, we throw mods on it, especially this bike. First thing I did to this was throw an exhaust. I'm not riding it with this on there. That's a Yoshi, but I'm like, that's not my style. Instantly swap it out for the M4. And actually, I had Voodoo. There you go. I have 2. Have Voodoo, have M4. You're probably going to get that windscreen. You're going to get all those things. You'll see some people saying, don't get frame sliders. No, get frame sliders. And the argument to that is if your bike goes down at a higher speed, it's going to mess up the bike more. But if you go down at a high speed anyways, dude, the bike's done anyways. At that point, it's more about you. Forget about the bike. What frame sliders do is if you tip it over in your driveway, well, now you don't ruin the tank, the fairings, and all that stuff. That costs money too. OEM fairings for sport bikes cost a lot of money. I mean, even knockoff fairings. I would get frame sliders immediately. That's the first thing I would do is get frame sliders. Well, got to get exhaust first, then frame sliders. Or just buy them both. You're going to get that tune. You're going to get that exhaust, all that crap that goes into it. And then after you're done with all of that, you have to figure out who's maintaining this bike. Motorcycles are pretty easy to work on, especially if you get like a Japanese bike that's just pretty simple. This isn't beginner bike, but that's why I love these bikes. Simple, fast, cheap. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. To me, it's great. To other people, like, oh, it's a gsxr. Learn how to do your own maintenance. I'm going to make more videos on that. That can also help you save money. Simple things like, for example, the battery. A lot of people don't know that you're actually supposed to maintain your battery. That's why I recommend to get one of these. This is a battery tender and a maintainer. I haven't bought one battery yet for either one of my bikes because of this right here. This costs like $70. I'll link it below. I'm not telling you to buy it. I'm telling you that if you don't have it, you're losing money. Starting up the bike doesn't maintain the battery. It does charge it, but it doesn't maintain a full charge. Another thing that you want to do is get an aftermarket filter. The stock ones are not reusable, but if you get an aftermarket one that's made out of fabric, you can actually clean it, re-oil it, and throw it back in the bike. Chain, sprockets, brakes, fluids, oil changes, pretty simple. Pretty much anybody can do that. Maybe a little difficult at first, but really not that difficult, especially with the internet today. There's a video on literally how to do everything. And you don't have to buy all this fancy bike clean, this, that. You can just go buy for your chain, just go buy kerosene. Does the same exact thing for a fraction of the price. You can buy a ton of it too. Again, you don't have to buy all this stuff. It's all just money pit, money pit, money pit. And you're new, you don't really know. That's why I said, hey, maybe consider buying a new bike. You do have to maintain a new bike, but a new bike requires less maintenance than an old used bike. Old used bike needs literally everything you can think of. Adjusting your chain isn't that hard. If you want to know more about that, watch this video right here. But make sure you lube, maintain, and adjust your chain. That's pretty important. And when you're actually adjusting the chain, it's important that you do that correctly. Let's say you adjust it too tight. You're actually at risk of snapping the chain like you can see in this clip right here, because it could actually snap and cause an accident. Could also smack the motor. Oil could leak everywhere, and then you potentially need a new motor. Could also whack your leg, and you could end up having a serious injury. And it's also important that it's not too loose either, or you're going to wear out your sprockets much quicker. The chain should have about an inch of play, and it's good. And that brings me into the next thing is do research. Research is the most important thing. This video right here sums up why you should do research. Go look at the comments in this video right here. That's why it pays to do research on specific bikes. Like this bike's definition of why you do research has a recall on the frame and the brakes. Not a big deal, but if you take it into a dealership, it is a big deal because they never want to do anything for free. That's car or bike. They always try and get you on something else. Mechanic really recommends you do this. It's going to be $2,000. I'm like, dude, no, I don't have my wallet. No. Mechanic really says, I'm like, no, they don't make money doing work for free. They hate that. That's why it pays to do research on specific bike. If you just found out what a 2012 R6 was yesterday, you should research that bike for a month before you even go near it. This bike is also a good example. This bike, they actually didn't recall the electrical issue on this bike until the next gen, which was the '08. You can't take it into a dealership and get it recalled. You have to do that work yourself. I looked at 150 of these bikes and almost everyone was new and they were flipping it and they were telling me it's good. I'm like, no, it's not good. I know it's not good. If it's new, you should still do research on the bike, but if it's used, you got to do double that research, especially if it's old. If it's old, you got to do triple. Not only do you research the bike, but you also need to research accidents. There's always those people when you get a bike, they're like, "Oh my God, so and so crashed." I'm like, "What happened?" "Oh, they were on a motorcycle." Is that all you're? Is that all you're gonna tell me? Or I'm like, "Were they turning left?" "Oh yeah, it says a car was turning left." "Was it through an intersection?" "It was through an intersection." That's what I'm saying. You got to do research on accidents. But you are on a bike, and anything can happen. Cars can pull out in front of you. I was literally driving in my car 2 days ago. Lady just pulled out right in front of me, wasn't even looking. Common thing with these bikes is people that get these don't know when and when not to speed. They don't have what I would call situational awareness. You really got to know when and when not to hit it on these. If you're one of those people and you have a car right now and you just drive 15 over and tailgate everyone, don't get a bike until you stop doing that. Because if you do that on one of these, it's a matter of time. Not if, but when, if you ride like that. And going through intersections is a place where you definitely don't hit it. That's when you go into that zone where you're like, okay, I got to slow down. Even if I think I can make it through this at a fast speed, always slow down through intersections. That's when cars turn left. That's when people pull out in front of you. And if you're on a back road, also slow down. Another common way to crash this is going off the road and low siding the bike because they're going too fast usually. That happens all the freaking time with these. People get these, they're extremists. I gotta go fast. I gotta go fast. And they get them and they put them in a ditch. So be very, very careful with crotch rockets. Research before you even go near a bike. Research. If you guys are buying a bike and it's your first bike and you do want to buy it used, I highly recommend that you watch this video and this video so you don't get scammed. You really, really don't want to get scammed.